I'm thinking that because it's a tax really on imports, isn't that under? I mean, I'm all for Trump doing it, but I'm just afraid they're going to say it's just Congress's job. But you don't think that's the case, that he could squeeze that in under something else, that a power that the president has?
Yeah, so I think
Does that make sense?
that's the key is what's the purpose of the tariffs, right? If the tariffs are if the purpose of the tariffs is to for economic benefit only, then I think they're going to go more that has to be Congress. If it's done for a security reason or national security or other types of type of sanction, then it's going. I think that they very well might say that's within the power of the executive to enforce sanctions on certain countries. So again, it's all about wording. I think the effect is the same.
Okay.
The effect is always going to be the same, but I
Okay.
think it's just how they plan to actually enact it. So
Okay.
I think they'll find a way to try to find it constitutional. I think is what's
Okay,
ends
I
up going to
hope
happen.
so. I really do. This is a big worry. Okay, well, thanks. And I don't know. I know your show is packed, but if you have the chance to deal with the Canada and China stuff, that would be great.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to the full story on WYB 103.9. Sorry, I pushed the wrong button there. I turned the mic off instead of turning it on. Getting back into what I first want to talk about is what's going on with these the protesters. So essentially, here's as I watch it. First off, is I just want to say that these protesters that are protesting the Ice Age, especially in Minnesota, they have a lot of trust for the ICE agents. Because here's the thing: if you're going to protest, if you are going to try to be not even protest, if you're just going to be obstructive to someone, and even if you think you're in the right, those people have guns. Okay, they have other sorts of things that can make your day miserable, and especially if they have lethal force. Regardless if you think you are right, if you're going to get in their face, mock them, impede them, push them, get in their way, you have a lot of trust. They're not going to just shoot you. So I think that these protesters, they have a lot of trust for these ICE agents, because I can tell you right now, if a guy has a gun, I'm not going to try to upset him. That is just beyond common sense. Again, let's take, for example, like I said, let's just, for the sake of argument, let's just consider that the ICE agents are in the wrong, right? Let's just say they're in the wrong. That doesn't mean anything to you. If you do everything right and the ICE agent is completely wrong, doesn't mean anything if you're dead, okay? Because you're dead at the end of the day. Because I keep seeing this, raised up, about what happened with the fatal shooting in Minnesota. So take, for instance, if someone is carjacking you, right? Someone who is carjacking you or just robbing you at gunpoint, they are completely in the wrong. But they put a gun to your head and they say, give me your car keys, or they say, give me your wallet, give me your purse, and you don't do it and you get killed. You are completely within your right not to give them your purse, wallet, what have you. But it doesn't matter anymore because you're dead, right? What is more important, your life or whatever that thing was, right? So the same thing with these ICE agents. Now the problem is that these ICE agents are also acting within their legal authority most of the time. There are always better decisions to be made. Don't get me wrong, as I've talked about at length last week on the shooting. Definitely some better decisions could have been made on both sides of that aisle. But again, at the end of the day, what does it matter to you if you're not there to see it? And that's what these people don't understand. And it's also funny to me that if you notice that all of these protesters are white people, right? I mean, we're talking about in Minnesota. You don't see the Somalis out there doing, because I think the white people are the ones who don't have any common sense. A black guy ain't gonna go up and say that guy has a gun. It's like, they're always looking for a reason to shoot me. I ain't gonna make it any. I'm not giving any more reasons, right? It's these stupid white people that think that they think they're above the law. They think they're above common sense. Obviously, like I said, taking the law out of it, because let me tell you, law or no law, a weapon is an equalizer, no matter what the law is. And so you're going to purposely get in front of these guys who are fully armed and have full riot gear on, full protective helmets, everything, and you're going to heckle them. You have a lot of trust. That guy's just not going to be tired of you and just like, you know what? I'm tired of your BS. I'm going to shoot you. Like you got a lot of trust in that special agent, in that ICE agent, and that's what blows my mind to me, right? If I want to protest, especially against armed individuals, I'm going to do so at a distance. Okay, and you have a right to do it, and you have a right to be there. And if there are wrongs done by the police, right, you have a right to do that. You never have a right to impede justice. You never have a right to obstruct justice. And again, whether you're right, wrong, or indifferent, or whether the ICE agent is right or wrong, doesn't matter if you are dead. So the way I look at it is that these protesters have the ultimate trust for the ICE agents. They trust these ICE agents a whole lot more than I would ever trust them. And that, I think, is something they maybe need to think about, is how much do you really trust them to do it? Because you're literally protesting that the ICE is doing the wrong things. That's what you're literally protesting on. Yet you are wholly and 120% trusting them that they will do the right thing and not shooting you. It's just like it's kind of an oxymoronic thing that's going on right there. That they don't realize exactly what they are doing. So if you really, really do trust those ICE agents, then I guess continue on. But I would not trust them. Of course, I wouldn't trust anybody with a gun with that. In that instance, I'm just not going to heckle anybody if they have a gun. Period. Even if I have a gun, I'm not going to heckle someone else with a gun, right? Because then I'm still putting it up to chance. That person may outdraw me, right? Not going to happen. It's just I'm not gonna put that up to chance. And that's what these people, they just don't realize. And again, it's just a bunch of white liberals who have always been keyboard warriors for such a long time, and they're having to face the harsh reality of what really goes on in this world, and that you can't just heckle and shoot and obstruct and get in the way or throw bottles or what have you at armed individuals. Again, whether you're right or wrong is quite irrelevant if you're not alive to see it. So I think they should consider their tactics. I also still hope that the FBI and others are searching or investigating into these different organizations that are telling these individuals to obstruct justice, because that is at least conspiracy to obstruct justice, as well as look into what these politicians are doing in Minnesota to further obstruct justice or put officers' lives in danger, because they're the ones, it's the rhetoric that are killing these people. I mean, these people are obviously lemmings, right? They don't have any common sense, as I just mentioned, because they're doing this to armed individuals. So you have a bunch of people who have been surrounded their whole life by safety and just coddled their whole lives mostly, have lived in a bubble, and don't understand reality. And therefore, those are easy people to use as your lemmings. And they know this. These organizations know this, right? The lady who was shot last week, she had no job. This is what she was doing. She was an ICE warrior is what they called her, right? And people like her are easily convinced, right? Just like any other individuals that can almost like predators, where they can understand that these people are easily convinced. And now these people are still responsible for their own actions. This does not resolve them of their responsibility. Don't get me wrong. right? They are still adults. They're still adults that have, minds, but these adults are not the sharpest knives in the drawer. They are not ones that can think wholly independent for themselves, or even look at the future. They're only reactionary, and they just eat up what these politicians and groups are telling them. And especially these groups that are telling them what to do and how to obstruct, they need to be investigated because they are costing lives at the end of the day. That's all they're doing. And I hope these politicians understand they're costing lives as well. I mean, when the mayor says, "Get the F out of my town," what kind of rhetoric do you think that's going to happen? And we've seen that rhetoric, right, with the left for so long. And look at what's happened, right? There was an attempt on the president's life. Charlie Kirk gets assassinated. It's just violence after violence coming from the left because of this rhetoric. And you think about it, if you think about, hey, they're telling me that these people are trying to take over my country. They're going to hurt my rights. They are going to take away my rights, and I need to save the country, and therefore I'm going to take lethal action. I need to kill these individuals. I need to obstruct these individuals in order to protect my country, right? And it's very easily to convince someone of that. Not hard at all, honestly. As I like to say, there's also always a fine line between terrorist and patriot, right? What is the line there? It matters who's in power, I guess. Is who's a terrorist and who's a patriot? Because that's how they portray this, right? Is that you are a patriot, you're defending the cause, just like our forefathers who took up arms against the British government, right? I mean, I could easily sell it to someone. These people are taking arms against us, just like the British government were, and it takes just a shot heard around the world to get things started, right? Just like then. I mean, it's easy to convince them. They are trying to take away your rights, just like the British government did, just like our forefathers fought against. So live up to what your forefathers believed in, and take up arms against these individuals, obstruct them, stop them from doing that. This is your patriotic duty to do so, or else your children will suffer. That's an easy sell, ladies and gentlemen. That is a very, very easy sell. And people very easily fall into it, especially, they don't have jobs, they don't have anything else. It's how revolutions are sometimes started, just by rhetoric, which is why they always say the pen is much more powerful than the sword, because through words, someone can get thousands of followers to be able to do this. That's exactly what these groups are doing. And the thing is, they're not doing it. They may be able to sell that as patriotism. It has nothing to do with that. It's about their own power, as it's always been, right? It's never about the individual who is doing the fighting, who's doing the killing, who ends up dying. It's always the people in power, the people who control it. And they want nothing to do with liberty. Couldn't care less. They want Donald Trump out. They want Donald Trump to look bad, and getting these people killed is probably within their playbook, because that's exactly what they want. They want ICE to be able to shoot these people. That's why they're telling them to put themselves in danger. They want them to get killed because it furthers their own narrative. Look how fast all these Democrat politicians have jumped onto it. That's proof in and of itself that this is their whole plan all along, is to get these individuals that will follow them blindly with no common sense to put themselves in harm's way, where ICE agents have no choice but to defend themselves, and they end up dying, and that just furthers their cause. And the more that die, the more that get shot, the better it is for them, at least in their mind. It's better for them. So then they can point out, look how bad the Trump administration is. They're killing our civilians. Look what they do, not knowing the fact that they're the ones who put them in that position to begin with. So I hope people can start to see what these groups and politicians are doing. You're just using you as pawns, and they're putting your life in danger. And you're just how many of you have to be killed before you understand what is going on? All right, we're going to take another break right here. If you want to call in, number 601-879-0002, but keep it tuned to the full story on WYAB 103.9. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to the Full Story on WYAB 103.9 as we get to our next story. And I want to talk about something that I talk quite a bit here on my show because it's very important, because home ownership is one of the pillars of a successful society. It builds wealth. Ownership of homes is something that it builds generational wealth. And the lack of ownership of homes, especially later in life as life goes on, and unable to build equity in homes, really hinders a lot of it hinders that accumulation of wealth. It's why Congress and presidents in the past have always tried to spur or incentivize home ownership. It was the whole reason that the VA even started VA loans after the for the GI Bill in World War II, was to be able to give all of these returning service members, of which there are many of them, to put them into homes. And it was a great boon to the economy by having VA backed loans for those individuals. So there's always been legislation to incentivize home ownership. And Trump is now looking to do that as well, as he signals a plan to ban institutional investors from buying single family homes. So he announced on Truth Social on January 7th, and framed it as part of his efforts to restore the American dream of home ownership. He said, for a very long time, buying and owning a home was considered the pinnacle of the American dream. It was the reward for working hard and doing the right thing. But now, because of the record high inflation caused by Joe Biden and the Democrats in Congress, the American dream is increasingly out of reach for far too many people, especially young Americans. It is for this reason and much more that I am immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single-family homes, and I will be calling on Congress to codify it. People live in homes, not corporations. So again, this has a lot to do. It wasn't clear what he meant by large institutional investors, but it typically means a company, which is typically a private equity group or a publicly traded real estate investment trust. That's a REIT that I talked about earlier, real estate investment trust, REIT, that owns and manages a large portfolio of single family rental homes at scale. Not a mom and pop landlord with a handful of properties. So, if you have 5, 6 properties or 2 or 3 properties, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking people with usually 100 or more single family homes, with the biggest players of this actually owning a lot more than that, with tens of thousands. Of course, the best known names in this category include Blackstone, along with Invitation Homes, American Homes for Rent, and Progress Residential, which is owned by private equity firm Pretium. And if you've ever been part of a company that has been taken over by a private equity firm, you know just how bad those things are, right? Those things, private equity firms, are nothing but cash grabs. It's all they care about, right? I mean, it is the worst of the worst of capitalism is private equity firms. When people think, man, capitalism bad, that is the private equity firms, right? That is exactly what they point at. So they buy homes in target markets, renovate them, then lease and manage them using centralized systems. There are even a few here in this area. And when you get into larger areas, there's much more. So these large investors collectively own about 450,000 single-family homes nationwide, according to a 2020 report by the U.S. Accountability Office, U.S. Government Accountability Office, GAO. So that's quite a bit. 450,000. That's 450,000 homes that were taken out from that could have been bought by single individuals, or even local families buying houses to rent out as well. The sector's rapid growth traces back to the aftermath of the 2007 to the 2009 housing crash, when foreclosures and distressed sales created an opportunity for well-financed buyers to acquire homes in bulk and convert them into rentals. And what they do is, unlike a lot of others, right? When you have to buy a house, very few people can pay cash for a house, right? Even if it's a cheap house, not a lot of people have, $180,000 just sitting in their pocket, right? And that's on the low end of things, right? For what they do. I mean, in places like DC, even a basic house is going to be $300,000. So not just people just aren't usually walking around with that kind of money in their pocket, but these institutional investors do. So these are cash purchases, which, to the owner selling it, that sounds great, right? We don't have to go through all of that. None of these closing. It's just they take care of everything. They buy it without any kind of warranty. They handle all closing costs. Everything is handled. They make it as easy as easy as they can for the homeowner who is selling the home to be able to sell it. So it's like, why would I sell to this family who has to go through a mortgage? There's going to be all this. They need warranty work done. There's going to be work done in the house, or I can sell it for the same amount to this investor who would just give me the cash and we all get to walk home and it'd be a good day. That's essentially why they're able to grow so fast. The GAO notes that these institutional investors moved aggressively into single-family rentals after the housing downturn, and built large portfolios of homes managed under a single company structure. One of the most prominent examples is Invitation Homes, which grew out of a platform backed by Blackstone and later became a public company. So while they only account for a small share, and again, it's not just them, right, that is responsible for the rising housing cost, but it definitely doesn't help, right? They've definitely taken, like I said, 450,000. Think about it, that's 450,000 families that could have had homes, right? Again, and the large scale of things, we have a population of 300 million. You imagine 450,000, that affects probably, you figure a family of 3 or 4, you're affecting a population of 2 million. But even that, you're almost getting at 1% of the population. So again, a small amount, but not an insignificant amount. And especially amounts in different markets, especially markets they target heavily, it very much affects. It is, like I said, not only that, it's just growing. And as we see it, it's not just that they own 450,000, it's 450,000 and growing rapidly. Again, until 2008, this is not really a thing. So in just that short amount of time from 2008 to now, so less than 20 years, they have been this aggressively obtaining these companies. These housing, which is, again, taking effect with the inflation that has happened as well. And the fact they just don't build cheap houses anymore. I say cheap, they don't build affordable housing anymore. Affordable housing is like the big, especially like in Madison County or, city of Madison, all these other places, affordable housing is like the big no-no word, because they somehow think that affordable housing means, undesirable people, which blows my mind. When, we've built affordable housing for generations, right? And it's what, again, builds wealth, what builds a society. And you wonder why your county is dying. You wonder why I take Madison County as a great example, because it's a county that has been losing tax base year after year, very little growth, if any, especially compared to other places. And they wonder what's going wrong, right? Glucks, that's a great example. They double-digit losses in their tax base in the last year, and they're a brand new city. And you wonder, why is this happening, right? Why are businesses not going in? Well, businesses aren't going in because there's no people coming in, because you're not building any houses where people can actually afford. And they want to, and I blame the public and I blame politicians for that, because they want to pass regulations, and they want to pass regulations and city ordinances and everything else to try to prevent the building of these houses, right? I see time and time again, they want, it has to be 2,200 square feet, which is absolutely ridiculous for a family that just needs to start, right? And so again, you combine all of these factors, it doesn't help. And then the houses that were already built, right? These houses that were affordable, they are being bought by institutional investors to then rent out. So, as a first-time home buyer, you're kind of screwed. I can't afford a $500,000 house, but there's no inventory for a house that would be $200,000 because these institutional investors buy them, or they're just being rented out. And that's the kind of the rock in the hard place. So it's just, again, it's multiple factors that are built in, and this is nothing but growing. So that's why Trump is looking to, that's why he's looking to curb how much is down now. In his true social post, like a lot of times, there wasn't details on how he plans to do that. But he is going to discuss the idea and additional housing policy at the World Economic Forum annual meeting starting on Monday in Davos, Switzerland. That goes from January 19th to January 23rd. What he'll be discussing is what his people have put out, his plan for this more affordable housing and how to attack these institutional investors. So we'll learn more about this next week. So I wanted to put it on your radar, so you see that's coming, because I think these are the types of things that, again, they don't make the news all the time. This is the kind of stuff that affects everyday Americans much more so than Greenland or what ICE is doing in Minnesota. These are the things that affect everyday Americans, and why I think it's important to cover them, even though they're not the sexy news. That, REITs aren't sexy. They aren't as sexy as ICE shootings, but they affect a whole lot more people, and people need to be informed about it. And these are types of laws that need to be pushed, as well as other laws to support it, right? Like getting rid of these ordinances and local laws that prevent the building of affordable housing. All right, we're going to take a break right here. If you want to call into the break, 601-879-0002. Keep it tuned to the full story on WYAB 103.9. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to the Full Story on WYAB 103.9 as we get here to the last part of this first hour. One story I want to cover is something that a caller called in regarding the cozying of Canada and China with a potential deal. Again, I love hearing from you guys, and if there's any stories you guys like to hear, I can always pivot because I do think this is an interesting story I want to try to fit in. So we were trying to get to that after we talked with Joe at the top of the hour. About what this deal is between Canada and China and what it can mean for security purposes, and are they out of their effing mind to be able to do this? I think I can say that. I think I can do that without saying without getting fined. Don't find me, FCC, because it is absolutely crazy. So we are going to cover that story as well as some more others that we want to get to. But keep it tuned right here to the Full Story. If you want to call into this long break, 601-879-0002. If there's any other things you want me to look at or investigate, I am always happy to do so. Again, that's 601-879-0002. Keep it tuned here to the Full Story on WYAB 103.9.
They build wooden houses on frozen ponds in the summertime when the water's gone. Diagonal lines in their rolled out lawns, and the sage always smells so pretty. But nobody cares where the birds have gone when the rain comes down on Babylon. The stonemason's phone rings all day long, and you gotta get back to the city. I built my house up on this rock, baby, every day with you.
CBS News on the Hour, your home for original reporting.
I'm Allison Keyes. Fans of the space program turned out in droves early to watch NASA take another step toward the first blast off for the moon in more than half century. The rocket is 322 feet tall.
I'm Peter King at the Kennedy Space Center. The Space Launch System, the SLS, is out of the barn, riding on top of an Apollo-era mobile transporter that took the Saturn V moon rockets and later the space shuttles from the VAB out to launch pads 39B and A. The distance from here to the pad is just over 4 miles. This crawler goes slower than a snail's pace. Its maximum speed 1 mile per hour. It's not even going to get close to that for what could be a 10 to 12 hour trip out to the pad.
President Trump says he's imposing a new 10% tariff on Denmark and 7 other European nations unless a deal is reached for the complete and total purchase of Greenland. He says the tariffs will jump to 25% if there's no deal by June 1st. Both Republican Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski and Democratic Delaware Senator Andrew Coons are there.
Greenland needs to be viewed as our ally, not as an asset.
There's a lot of rhetoric, but there's not a lot of reality in the current discussion in Washington.
Weather woes in store for much of the nation, but snow fans should be pleased. CBS News meteorologist John Elliott.
For the Northeast and all the way down into the South, snow and gusty winds for the lakes. A blizzard warning. Enough snow and winds at 80 miles an hour, just blinding for the northern plains and then parts of central Georgia.
A very special way to remember the boxer still known as the greatest. CBS's Cammie McCormick reports Muhammad Ali is getting a postage stamp.
It was unveiled in his hometown of Louisville, and 22 million are being printed. Stamps feature a 1974 photo showing him holding up his gloves in a fighting stance. His widow, Lonnie Ali.
He would say, I told you, the only way I could be licked is if I was put on a postage stamp. He goes, and I'm going to be licked a lot. He'd say something like that.
She said the stamp will travel millions of miles and remind the world of a man who dared to believe kindness could be powerful.
Looking back now at a musical legend. Fans and musicians alike are remembering the late Grateful Dead guitarist Bob Weir, who died a week ago at the age of 78 after a battle with cancer. There is a public gathering in San Francisco where Deadheads from around the world will pay tribute in a procession without music. But of course, there's a concert later tonight. This is CBS News.
I'm Andrew Garrett. Follow and listen to The Takeout on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Guys, if you want the greatest night of your life, I mean your best night ever, then you gotta hear this. There's a new ED pill out, and it's from the makers of Viagra. It's their first new ED pill in over 20 years. This new super pill is called Viagra AGV, and it's unbelievable. It works super fast in only 11 minutes and lasts up to 14 hours, thanks to its new vasodynamic delivery system. Plus, it's FDA approved and safe. There has never been any ED pill like it. It's unreal what it does to you. In testing, Viagra AGV crushed every other ED pill. It destroyed them all. And now, 9 out of 10 urologists are recommending Viagra AGV over any other ED pill. Every man alive needs to try this new Viagra AGV super pill at least once. Then you'll know why men are going crazy over it. So if you want to have the most incredible night of your life, you can't miss this. Go to scoreblue.com and try it while supplies last. That's scoreblue.com.
What are some of the best paying jobs you can get?
With a median salary of almost $130,000 and plenty of openings, once again, nurse practitioners considered the best job out there, according to U.S. News and World Report's list of the 100 best jobs of 2026. The list is full of jobs.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I gotta my camera, get the right camera here. I gotta point to see which camera this is going. There we go. There we go. Turn it. Okay. We got new cameras in here, so we lost our fancy ones that we used to have with remotes. Now it's just just got to move them physically. All right. Let's see. I'm just looking at your. So I guess everything's football right now. Then, huh?
Yeah. I think basketball is being played, but I think that the focus will shift more towards that.
Once we get through the playoffs,
the next couple of weeks.
I'm wondering if people are playoffed out by this point. It's like playoff after playoff after playoff.
There are a lot of playoff games. Yeah, it lasts a lot longer.
Let's see here. So interesting on the staying power football set. That'd be a good conversation. Sorry, I'm just checking. Okay, about to hit on.
Okay, awesome.
Do not necessarily reflect those of this radio station, its parent, affiliated, or related entities, agents, or employees.
It's time for The Full Story with your host, Matthew Bishop. Matt's back on the WYAB airwaves. And now, the host of The Full Story, Matthew Bishop.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here. Welcome back here to The Full Story on WYAB 103.9 as we get to our second hour. Again, great calls from people. So 2 stories I want to make sure we cover. I actually got 2 calls on the same thing, which is I got 2 calls on Supreme Court coverage. Obviously, Supreme Court will be releasing opinions in the next couple of weeks from their October term, possibly. And of course, the 2 cases that everybody wants to know about is the transgender one and the tariff case. So I at least want to talk about the tariffs case. I mean, there's a lot of big things on the October term. So once these opinions start going, as we always do, we'll do a deep dive on when those opinions are released. I'm especially interested in the one from Louisiana about the Voting Rights Act as one that I'm most particularly interested in, just because of the effects it could have on the state of Mississippi and what we can do to be able to redraw our lines. But before we get into the heavy discussions of tariffs, both from the Supreme Court and what's going on with Canada and China, I want to bring it back to our great sports analyst Joseph Jones. He always every week he tries to lighten it up a little bit by bringing a little bit of even though Ole Miss did lose and they're no longer in the national championship. But he does try to bring a little bit of brevity to the conversation. So Joe, thanks for bringing back on.
Thank you, Matthew. Great to be here.
So of course, we got some big weeks coming up with the playoffs. We obviously got NFL divisional round as well as the national championship coming up. Is that right?
That's right. You've got 4 games this weekend. I'm really excited about Denver and Buffalo later today, for instance. I think all 4 games could be really good.
Do you think Buffalo will ever win a Super Bowl? I mean, I think they're destined. I think they're always destined to go to them, but never win them.
That's the big question. And this year, the stars really aligned for Josh Allen with a lot of the players that have caused him the most trouble not being in the playoffs this year. No Joe Burrow, no Lamar Jackson, no Patrick Mahomes. But tough luck, they didn't win their division, and so they would have to go on the road and win the next 2 games to get to the Super Bowl. Yeah,
but is that really? I mean, Buffalo in January is just miserable, even for their own players. Like, I get it's like maybe because they're they play in Buffalo all the time, so maybe it's an advantage. But man, even if it's an advantage, I don't know if that's the advantage I want in playing in knee deep snow.
Well, that's true, and if they're able to pull this off, I mean, they sure would have earned it. So I guess that would kind of make sense with the irony and the difficulty of that fan base for the year that maybe they do it is the year where it's really the toughest long shot.
Yeah. Like I said, what was it? Was it the 90s? They went to 3 straight Super Bowls and they lost. Is that
4?
4
straight.
Yeah, it was something. My brother is a Bills fan. I never knew why he was a Bills fan. Honestly, he's never lived in New York his whole life, but he was always a Bills fan. So it's always fun to mention that to him. So who's all playing? Who's all playing in the divisional round this weekend?
So Denver and Buffalo. And that matchup's interesting because the Bills and also Sean Payton is now coaching the Broncos. And then you've got
Sean Payton, and then just the just the crazy career he's had in the wraparound after the Saints. I thought he was done after the Saints, and now here he is once again. Maybe I've always really liked Sean Payton. Honestly, he's a fun coach to watch. I think he's a great coach. So I would love to see Sean Payton in the Super Bowl again.
Yeah, he's really kind of extended his career with kind of this new life, coaching Bo Nix and getting the number 1 seed in the AFC. And so they've got a prime opportunity this year. And so it really should be, I think, a fantastic game out there in Denver today. And then tonight you've got San Francisco in Seattle. And then tomorrow afternoon, it's New England hosting Houston, the Texans. And then tomorrow late afternoon is the Rams at the Bears.
Okay. And what a game the Bears the Bears game was last week. I mean, what a that was just a fun game, fun game to watch and see them come back like they did. Not that I'm not a Bears fan even in the slightest, but it was a fun game to see. And of course we got the national championship. And that's coming. When is the national championship?
That's going to be Monday night. So you have 3 straight, days of technically playoff games, culminating with a Miami-Indiana matchup on Monday night.
Wow. And I mean, one thing about the national championship for college football, these guys have actually had quite a break, especially Miami. I mean, it's been So it was last Thursday. So 2 Thursdays ago. I mean, that's quite a long of a. It's almost like having a. Almost a week and a half of break there.
Yeah, they got more time to rest, kind of get ready for the game. And I think it's a very intriguing matchup. It's not the matchup that probably a lot of traditionalists obviously wanted. A lot of people would probably like to see like the Ohio States and the Alabamas playing a game like this. But I think it's very intriguing. I think you've got 2 outstanding defenses. I think I'm really interested to see the chess match between those units and also the offenses, which offense is able to control the game. Is Miami going to be able to eat a lot of clock, or will Indiana's offense continue to be too much like they've been against everybody else that they played?
Yeah, I think again, Miami's always key thing is the war of attrition, as I like to say, right? Just keep hammering at their defense. Just keep your offense. They don't have to make a lot of play. I mean, you don't have to make a big play, just a bunch of small plays, just to keep their defense on, just so you get to the fourth quarter where you're more fresh than they are. Because I mean, if anybody, like you said, deserves to be there, it's Miami. Of all the, I mean, every single game I think. Outside of maybe I can't remember who the favorite was in the Ole Miss game, but I think they've always been the losing team based on the betting odds ever since the playoffs began.
Yeah, they've come in and kind of earned it the hard way. I was talking about Buffalo trying to win 3 road games. I mean,
Yeah.
Miami's had to go through a tough, battle going through, A&M and Ohio State and Ole Miss. I mean, just a lot of tough teams. And so this is an Indiana team that has a chance to go 16-0, be, I think, a historically great team with just a legendary quarterback. And so Miami's, got an uphill battle here. But with everything else they've defied this year, even making the playoff, they really weren't even supposed to do that. I guess, it wouldn't be a colossal surprise, obviously, for them to potentially pull this off.
Well, I said it's been a surprise for them every single step along the way. But, speaking, we're talking about, Buffalo. And this is actually kind of really the first home game for Miami because it's being played in Miami. It's being played in the stadium they play in. So it's really like a home game for Miami, even though they're not technically the home team, I don't think.
That's right. I read somewhere they're the only team in major college football that would actually be in a position to host a national title game because everybody else does not play, in the city that's like a major hosting city of this caliber. And so it's like the 0.1% chance it could happen. It happened.
Yeah, so it's exciting. It's like you said, it's going to be exciting to see if there's any team to stop someone from having an undefeated season. It'd be the team whose only 2 losses were to unranked teams. They've beat every ranked team they've played so far, so they can continue on the streak. But Indiana's never. It'd be interesting because Indiana, they've never won a national championship. Is that right?
That's right. They've never done it. They've always been known as a basketball school, even baseball, maybe to some degree with guys like Kyle Schwarber over football. And they were a football team, that was kind of at the bottom of the Big Ten for so long. Even I think 2 or 3 years ago, they were a really bad team. And now, they've got a great coach. And, Mendoza is just an outstanding story. He's a quarterback that is so efficient. There's been games in the playoffs where he's had more touchdown passes than incompletions. And so it's kind of his efficiency against the Miami team, that will try to make it very difficult for him. And so, again, I think that's going to be just a fascinating chess match to see how both of those units approach it.
Well, it's interesting, you talk about, and obviously Miami, they haven't been into the national championship since the early 2000s of their kind of dynasty they had in the early 2000s. But I think this is the way it can be though with the way the transfer portal and NIL is now, in that these schools can essentially buy teams. Well, in the old days, before that, it was so relevant, your standing, how, what your recruiting class could be. That's why everybody wanted to coach in Alabama. That's why Alabama could be so competitive and just win national championship because, everybody wanted to go there. So they had this just advantage over everybody. But NIL and all this is kind of taking a lot of that away when, you can essentially just buy players. So you think that's some kind of maybe an effect on it where you see, these teams now that are, that never been heard of that now are like Indiana?
Yeah, I think it definitely allows teams like that, that are non-traditionals to rise to the top. You look at the playoff teams that made it to the Final Four, Indiana, Ole Miss making it this far. Oregon, 30 years ago was not going to be on this level. I mean, you've seen some teams that are able to have some staying power. Vanderbilt won 10 games this year. It's been a different world now. And so, yeah, I think that year to year, just the rosters are so drastically different. You're no longer, building for like a 3 to 4 year run.
Yeah. So, that's why, to me, it's interesting, talking about, the idea of paid players and how much they get, how much they get paid. That's why I think there needs to be contracts for the players, and other schools want them. They can buy out the contracts just like in the NFL. Because again, from a coaching perspective, it's pretty hard when you have a pretty drastically different roster if you lose money from 1 year to another. So, that's why contracts exist in professional football or professional sports, is that way I can plan on that person, or at least have an asset I can trade away to get different assets. If I want to dump a contract or something like that from a general manager standpoint. But, to me though, it does take away, like you said, it's taken away a lot of the, I think, especially from the SEC, a lot of that powerhouse that they used to have, because it kind of puts them on, other schools at equal footing because they also can buy players as well.
Yeah, it's basically like pro sports, without the same rule book and without having a draft, where when you have pro sports, you have the draft where the bad teams have a chance to get better. But the way this goes, it's like the highest bidder can get like all these players. And so, it just really just changes everything.
Yeah, I don't know. You may disagree with me what the future may be, Joe. But I don't see. I know a lot of people. Obviously Senator Cruz from Texas says NIL is going to be the death of college football. I see that being mentioned quite a bit from a lot of people. I think it's just we're kind of in the Wild West era of it. But once they get these rules pinned down. Once they get, once they get understand how getting contracts, getting general managers, creating actually, operating them like a professional team instead of a college team, is where it's going to have to end. I don't think it's going to kill it necessarily. It's just going to be a different type of sport. And it's you're not rooting for guys from your state anymore, but just like, people from New Orleans, no one who plays for the New Orleans Saints is from New Orleans, at least no one that I'm aware of. And very rarely is that the case. So it's, people I don't think are still going to root for their team because they went there or they're from there. So I don't think it's going to kill the game necessarily. It's just going to, the game's going to have to adapt until they get these rules into place.
Yeah, the adaptation will be key, to see kind of how the rules change, how the landscape changes. I do think the outlook for football, I think on the grassroots level, on the lower levels, we look at youth football, and now we're kind of seeing it with college. I feel like that's where I would be most concerned right now. That's where I would question, like over time, the staying power of football. I don't think like at the grassroots level, it's at the best place because you have so many youth that are now choosing to play like Olympic sports. So they want to play soccer. They want to play tennis, golf. They're doing things like that at an early age. Whereas, 30 years ago, there's like no question, like, the best athletes were going to definitely, suit up for football. And so I think that's where it's changed. And then I think, so now with all of that already changing, with people having injury concerns, about the safety of football that we've had for years with concussions, then you have all that kind of coming to this watershed moment where you're on the cusp, like you mentioned, of having to make some rule changes to NIL, maybe have some contracts, do some type of regulation. And so I think it's going to be key if you see mistakes made with lack of regulation, if that continues, then football could be really at a precarious place.
Yeah. Like I said, to me, more than anything, it's just as I've talked about, is the broader societal problem. So from a smaller sport standpoint, it is what it is. But I talk about from a broader societal problem of, I run around in Ridgeland, and I was running by Ridgeland High School is kind of like on my path that I run by, and like parents are now showing up just to watch like football practice because they think that's the future for my kid, right? Is not academics. It's not in the they're not showing up to their kids' student parent conferences, but they're showing up to the football practices because that's where the money is, right? The money's not in science. The money is in sports. And with NIL, the fact that used to, it was always a long shot. I remember my coaches always saying that in high school was, hey, get your education because only 1% make it to the NFL and ever make money off of this. You may get a free education in college, which is great. But never lack on your studies. Whereas now, people can go play college football and make more than most people make in their whole lifetimes, and never even play in the NFL, or not even get drafted or play 1 year in the NFL and bust, right? So, I see that a lot of, parents putting a lot of effort into the sports because, hey, that's our future. It's not science. And and especially, and especially it hurts women's sports even more because there is none of that. So it's just and that's from a societal standpoint is what to me is the most interesting shift that I see sociologically speaking.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I can see it, where more people are like, there's more pieces of the pie. And so let me play college football, get an NIL deal, like life-changing money, even if I don't go to the next level. I think another thing I've thought about is just with, all of these people trying to play college as long as they can to get as much money with NIL. I think we're already seeing some of this, but I think, at some point you're going to see people just challenge for like unlimited eligibility, where it's like, let me just stay as a student, like long term, like a Tim Tebow, would have been just like college rock star if he had played college football for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so I think you're going to see people trying to do something like that.
The quarterback from Miami has pretty much done that, right? He's been there for, I think, 6 years. He has or 7 years maybe that he's played, or 6.5, because he keeps gaining years. He had almost a whole career in Georgia, and then switches over to Miami. So yeah, just how long can he? Can I get my undergraduate, my master's, my PhD, and just stay in college football?
It'll be like, an average student, the argument might be, can stay in intramurals long term, so why can't I?
Yeah, exactly. It's not a bad argument, honestly. It's not an impossible argument, I think.
Yeah.
All right, Joe, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with. Where can people find your law firm?
So thank you so much, Matthew, for having me. And you can Google law office of Joseph Jones, and we'd love to see if we can help you.
Yeah, he's down there in Petal, which we reached down there. So if you're listening down there in Petal, he's right there in Petal and Hattiesburg. Do you say Hattiesburg or Hattiesburg? I never understood which one.
So I say Hattiesburg, but I've noticed that people that move here that aren't from here, they'll say Hattiesburg.
Okay. I never know. I don't know what the pronunciation, sort of like, in Oxford, it's everybody there says Lafayette County, even though it's named after a guy named Lafayette.
Yes. And I think they want to be different from Louisiana is why they do it. I say Hattiesburg because I know that the story is that it's named Hattiesburg after somebody whose name was Hattie. And so I emphasize Hattie, but I do think more people will probably say Hattiesburg.
Interesting. It's sort of like Houston Street in New York City, right? And, people think it's Houston, like Sam Houston from Texas, but it's named after a different guy who pronounced his name Houston. So it's called Houston Street in New York. But that's interesting. So it's named after Hattie. So technically the proper one is Hattiesburg. So it's named after Hattie. So it should be Hattie.
That's what I think. That's my personal opinion.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks, Joe. We'll have you on. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and take a break right here. When we get back, I want to get right into the requested story of Canada and China getting cozier with tariff deals. You're going to call in during the break, number 601-879-0002. Keep it tuned to the full story on WYAB 103.9. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to the Full Story on WYB 103.9. I want to spend pretty much probably the next two segments and the rest of the show on tariffs, as a couple of viewers have requested Supreme Court as well as what's going on in Canada. So Prime Minister Mark Carney, who is the Canadian Prime Minister, new approach to Canada's foreign policy can perhaps be detailed in one line. We take the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. That was his response when asked about the deal struck with China on Friday, despite concerns over its human rights record, and nearly a year after he called China, quote, the biggest security threat facing Canada. Literally just a year. I mean, that's a pretty quick turnaround there, Mr. Carney. The deal will see Canada ease tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles that it imposed in tandem with the U.S. in 2024. In exchange, China will lower retaliatory tariffs on key Canadian agricultural products. Carney told reporters on Friday that the world, quote, the world has changed in recent years, and the progress made with China sets Canada up well for the New World Order. What is the New World Order? He literally said the New World Order. I don't know what the New World Order is, Mr. Carney. Do you really think the New World Order is going to be China? I'll wait to get the facts in before I say anything more on that. But Canada's relationship with China, he added, has become, quote, more predictable than its relationship with the U.S. under the Trump administration, meaning they're a lot easier to bribe. That's what that means. I can easily pay them and I can get kickbacks a lot easier from China. That's what he's saying. Whatever kickbacks he's getting from China, I'm sure is much more predictable than the kickbacks that he was once getting from Biden and no longer is getting from Donald Trump. That's what I think he means by more predictable. He later wrote in a social media post that Canada was, quote, recalibrating its relationship with China, quote, strategically, pragmatically, and decisively. In Canada, as daylight broke on Friday, reaction to the deal was swift. Some, like Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, hailed it as very good news, as farmers in Moe's province have been hard hit by China's retaliatory tariffs on Canadian canola oil. But Ontario Premier Doug Ford, whose province is home to Canada's auto sector, it's actually right across the it's like Windsor, Canada, which is right there in Ontario. It's right across the river from the Detroit River and from Detroit. He said that removing EV tariffs on China would hurt our economy and lead to job losses. In a post on X, Ford said Carney's government was, quote, inviting a flood of cheap made in China. Let me rephrase that. I said that the lines were really flood of cheap made in China electric vehicles without any real guarantees of equal or immediate investment in Canada's economy. Some experts said that the electric vehicle provisions in the trade deal would help China make inroads into the Canadian automobile market. With the lower EV tariffs, approximately 10% of Canada's electric vehicle sales are now expected to go to Chinese automakers, not auto manufacturers. I was trying to get it right there. The expected increase in Chinese EV sales could put pressure on U.S.-based EV makers like Tesla, which are seeking to expand their market share in Canada. And for those who don't know, China has extremely, extremely cheap EVs. In fact, the EU had to put a 25% tariff on Chinese EVs because they were flooding the market in the EU and essentially putting out European auto manufacturers in a very big bind, even big ones like Volkswagen, because you cannot compete with any company in China because those companies are backed by the government. They're backed by the federal government, the Chinese government, the communist government is who they are backed by. And it also puts in security concerns. Like I said, literally, he said last year, they are the biggest threat to China. And he says, oh, the world has changed. That quickly? No, it hasn't. He can just be bought out, is what Mr. Carney can be. He can just be easily bought out by them. But also, again, when China starts getting more of these things, they are a security threat, right? There is no doubt that they want to expand their role. And this gives them essentially an inroad into Canada. Now, a cynic may say this is Trump's fault, right? Trump is the one who pushed Canada to China because of the tariffs that he had. And my thing is, I mean, Canada can easily come to a deal with the United States without having free trade, right? He is choosing China over doing a deal with America because, again, he can get kickbacks from China. I think that is clearly what is going on right here, because Chinese EVs will devastate. They said 10%. I think it's going to be, that expert said 10%. His name is Vivek Asvantosh. He's a professor at McGill University in Montreal. I think he's undercutting it because we saw what happened in Europe. It absolutely overtakes that because again, you can buy an EV from a Chinese manufacturer for $15,000, $20,000, right? Whereas an American made or European made electric is going to cost 50 or 60. I mean, it's crazy how cheap they can build them because slave labor, essentially, right? Paying people next to nothing, no environmental controls. I mean, these people really care. You know, the guys like him, they blame Trump for wanting getting out of like the Paris Accords and all these other stuff and the green initiatives. Do you realize what you're doing by coming up with deals with China, who cares nothing about the environment, to build Joe's electric cars? They're going to absolutely wreck the environment. They have no environmental controls. They have no things that protect their workers from toxic fumes and things like that. I mean, the amount of smog just coming from these facilities is absolutely ridiculous. This is the most, doing deals with China is the most dangerous thing you could ever do to the environment because they have no kind of concern whatsoever for it. Not to mention the dangerous mining that they do for their batteries as well. So, I mean, what is the purpose here? Is this purpose here just to try to shove it to Trump? Or also, again, the purpose to get him kickbacks? Because he's not helping his people. He's not helping his own industry, as Doug Ford talked about. I'm not a big Doug Ford fan, but I mean, even Ford said right there is that you're going to kill it. I think 10% is a low. I think it's going to take up probably 50%, if not more, of it. Again, that's why the EU had to do it, right? And not only that, they steal technology. I mean, once they come in, you can't get them out, right? Because they steal technology, steal information. No telling what kind of stuff they put on those cars. Again, these are government-run companies, so they could easily put cameras and trackers and things you would never even know on those vehicles. I mean, I wouldn't, even if it's $15,000, no way I'd buy a Chinese-made EV for those particular circumstances. And again, they're looking at ways to try to increase their worth in the world. And Canada is essentially just giving them, it's like you want a virus in your computer. It's like a hacker contacting, like, yeah, please put a virus in my computer. That sounds great. Go ahead and do it. That's exactly what Mr. Carney is doing right here. In an interview with CNBC on Friday morning, U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer called the deal problematic and said Canada may come to regret it. And however, Donald Trump had a little bit different take. I thought was pretty interesting. Donald Trump, when asked at the White House, he said he hailed it as a good thing. He said, if you can get a deal with China, you should do that. I think what he's saying is, if you want to walk in with the wolves, be my guest. I think if Donald Trump says it's a good idea, that should tell Mr. Carney, wait a minute. He's not supposed to say that. Why is Donald Trump saying that? What did we do? What did we get ourselves into, guys? Maybe we don't want to do this. If Donald Trump is smiling and say, good idea, Mr. Carney, go for it, my friend. It's like, I just made a horrible mistake. I just made a huge mistake. Sort of like on Arrested Development. I've made a huge mistake. It reminds me of that. I think that's your biggest warning is if Donald Trump is saying that. It's like, yeah, I think you screwed up, friend. You're inviting yourself. You're just inviting problems into your country is all that you're doing. So this is we'll see how this plays out for him, right? As they like to say, bold move, Cotton. We'll see how this plays out for you, but I don't think it's going to work out very well for them, as it just puts their own security and their own people and their own industry at risk. But if he hates Trump so much he's going to do that, then as Donald Trump said, go ahead and have fun, friend. Go and see how that works out for you. All right, we're going to take a break right here. If you want to call in during the break, number 601-879-0002. But keep it tuned to the full story on WYAB 103.9.
LS Tractor is committed to excellence and superior products. LS Tractor comes with a long list of standard features that are unmatched by other brands and backed with the LS commitment to provide exceptional customer service and satisfaction. You get a lot more for your money with the LS Tractor. Come to the Tractor Store in Richland to experience the LS difference. The Tractor Store in Richland.
Hi, Kim Wade here. Cork and Door Company has been providing quality residential garage and commercial overhead door products to Mississippians for over 50 years. Cork and Door is a supplier of garage door parts and services such as LiftMaster, commercial and residential door operators, as well as Clopay, sectional commercial and residential doors, Asta, commercial sheet and rolling steel doors, and Cornell, rolling steel and shutters, with many in stock for the same-day pickup. Corkanddoor.com. That's Corkanddoor.com.
A new year means a new you with a new ride from Mazda of Jackson with our extended super sale. Chart your new course in a 2025 CX-5 before they're gone. Price to move with 0.9% financing for 72 months with approved credit, and see why it's the compact crossover that's built for you. Plus, get 1 year maintenance included on your new vehicle purchase. It's time to make the resolution to choose Mazda today. Shop online at MazdaJackson.com or visit Mazda Jackson on I-55 Frontage Road.
At Sunkissed Tan and Wellness on Highway 49 in Flora, we specialize in providing exclusive tanning services and premium beauty products tailored for women. Our mission at Sunkissed is to enhance your natural beauty, offer expert advice, and create a personalized experience. At Sunkissed Tan and Wellness, step into our oasis and let us illuminate your beauty. Ask about our membership program. Find us on Facebook at Sunkissed Tan and Wellness or online at sunkissedtanandwellness.org.
Back in 1984, we started the fast service oil change. For over 40 years, Rapid Oil Change has been the leader in oil changes and fast service. We accept most major fleets and offer local 30-day in-house accounts as well. We do more than just change oil. From tires, wiper blades, tire sensors, just to name a few. Don't forget to show your ride some love with a trip to our Laser Wash 360, the best touchless wash in town, open 24/7. If you're not driving hard with Castrol Edge, come see us today. 6 locations, 6 days a week. We're ready to serve. OilChangeMS.com.
Hi, this is Lee Atkins of Home Care Plus in Ridgeland. We are a proud carrier of Abena Premium Incontinence products. Abena has the most absorbency available, making changes and leaks less likely. After 7 years as a seller, I can tell you these products are amazing and worth every penny to quality of life for patient and caregiver. And we ship all incontinence products as well. So please come see us at Home Care Plus in Ridgeland for all the incontinence needs of you or your family member. That's Home Care Plus in Ridgeland.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to the full story on WYAB 103 point as we continue on tariffs, but more importantly, the Supreme Court's potential decision. So as we're getting now into late part of January, it has now officially become Supreme Court season, which is one of my favorite seasons, guys. It's always the best, right? And everybody wants to talk about playoffs. What I want to talk about is Supreme Court season, because this is when all the opinions start coming out between now and to the end of summer. So they'll start rolling out. And one of the first ones that may come out is the opinion on Trump's tariffs. So everybody's been talking about this as it's been coming on of what's going to happen. So I just want to give you a little bit of background about it. And then, of course, when the opinion finally does come out, we will give a deep dive analysis in there. So beginning last February, Trump issued a series of executive orders imposing tariffs. Now, these tariffs can be divided into two categories. The first type is known as the trafficking tariffs, which target products of Canada, Mexico, and China, because Trump says those countries have failed to do enough to stop the flow of fentanyl into the United States. The second category is known as worldwide or reciprocal tariffs, which were imposed a baseline tariff of 10% on virtually all countries, and higher tariffs anywhere from 11% to 50% on dozens of them. And imposing the worldwide tariffs, Trump cited large trade deficits as, quote, an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and economy of the United States. Now, two different cases were filed. One case was filed in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia by Learning Resources and Hand to Mind, which are two small family-owned companies that made educational toys. And that's the case that is actually in the Supreme Court, the name of it. It is actually the Learning Resources cases. But one was joined with it, which was brought by a small wine importer, VOS Selections, as well as Terry Precision Cycling, which sells women's cycling apparel. So they obviously have standing to bring this as they import a lot of their products. So, what are the laws here that we're talking about? So, Article 1 of the Constitution gives Congress the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excise fees, right? And it requires that bills for raising revenues shall originate in the House of Representatives. In issuing the executive orders that impose the tariffs, Trump relied primarily on a 1977 law, which was the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the IEEPA. Section 1701 of the IEEPA provides that the president can use the law to deal with any unusual and extraordinary threat which has its source in whole or substantial part outside of the United States to the national security, foreign policy, or economy of the United States if he declares a national emergency with respect to such threat. Section 1702 of the Act provides that when there's a national emergency, the president may, quote, regulate importation or exportation of property in any foreign country or national thereof has any interest. So the Supreme Court has not weighed in on the president's power to impose tariffs under the IEEPA before. In United States versus Yoshida International, a 1975 decision by the U.S. Court of Customs and Patent Appeals is perhaps the most relevant to the current tariff debate because of the similarities between the IEEPA and the text of the law at the center of that case, which was the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. So that case began as a challenge to then-President Richard Nixon's imposition of a 10% temporary tariff on imports in response to a large trade deficit, which in 1971 was an unusual development in U.S. history. In 1974, the U.S. Customs Court, the predecessor to the Court of International Trade, ruled that Nixon did not have the power under the Trading with the Enemy Act, which allowed the president, in case of an emergency, to regulate the importation of any property in any foreign country or national thereof has any interest. So he said, even though he says he has the power to regulate the importation, that did not include a tariff. In response to the ruling of the Customs Court, a provision of the Trade Act of 1974 specifically gave the president the power to impose tariffs to deal with large and serious United States balance of payment deficits. But at the same time, the law limited tariffs to a maximum of 15% in a duration of 5 months. The Court of Customs and Patent Appeals reversed the decision of the Customs Court, concluding that Nixon had the authority to impose the tariffs after all. The 10% tariff, the court explained, was a limited one imposed as a temporary measure calculated to help meet a particular national emergency, which is quite different from imposing whatever tariff rates he deems desirable. That was the quote of it. So what was the key of that was that they did find that Nixon could, in fact, impose the tariff. And they said he could impose it because it was a limited amount, and it was only 10%. And then Congress also changed the law that allowed the president to do a maximum of 15% for a duration of 5 months. Now, again, that was under a different act. That was with the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. Trump is doing this under the IEEPA, which is why they couldn't do it under that act because of that law. So what are the challengers saying? So the challengers contend that unlike other laws that directly deal with tariffs, IEEPA doesn't mention tariffs or duties at all, and that no president before Trump has ever relied on IEEPA to impose tariffs. And the government has not provided an example of any other law, they add, in which Congress used the phrase regulate or regulate importation to give the executive branch the power to tax. Indeed, the group of small businesses led by VOS Selections say, quote, hundreds of statutes grant the power to regulate, and none has ever been understood to grant taxing powers. If regulate meant tax, it would overturn the accepted understanding of all these laws. They say that interpreting IEEPA to give the president the power to impose unilateral worldwide tariffs would create a variety of constitutional problems. First, they write, if it would run afoul of a doctrine known as the Major Questions Doctrine. which requires Congress to be explicit when it wants to give the president the power to make decisions with vast economic and political significance. Learning resources and hand to mind tell the justices that Congress does not and could not use such vague terminology to grant the executive virtually unconstrained taxing power of such staggering economic effect, literally trillions of dollars shouldered by American business and consumers. They say that allowing the president to rely on IEPA to impose the tariffs would also violate the non-delegation doctrine, the principle that Congress cannot delegate its power to make laws to other branches of the government. In their brief, they state that although Congress has, in limited circumstances, specifically given the president the power to adjust tariff rates, which they have done, the president in this case reads IEPA as delegating the entirety of Congress's tariffing authority to the president's essentially judicially unreviewable discretion with no intelligible principles guiding the amount of duration of the tariffs. Now, the government and the Trump administration counters that the tariffs fall squarely within the text of the IEPA, and Congress granted power to the president to regulate importation, as I talked about just earlier. U.S. Solicitor General John Squire argues, quote, argues the law plainly authorized the president to impose tariffs because tariffs are a traditional and commonplace way to regulate imports. They say the Federal Circuit and their decision was wrong when it concluded that even if IEPA authorizes tariffs, it does not authorize unlimited tariffs like the ones at the center of the case. IEPA and another federal trade law, the National Emergency Act, already impose substantial checks on tariffs, including by limiting emergencies to 1 year and through a, quote, a slew of procedural reporting requirements that allows Congress to override the president's determination. Moreover, the Solicitor General argues that the Supreme Court has never applied the doctrine in the foreign affairs context, where Congress presumably does grant the president broad powers to supplement his authority under the Constitution. So where does this lead us, right? So you see the two arguments there. I think that's what makes this case so intriguing, because I think both arguments are particularly are very great arguments on both side points. Let's just put out the politics for a side and let's just think of the law, right? Taxes, tariffs are traditionally always imposed by Congress, but Congress, especially in the last 30 years, has released a lot of their power to the executive, much to my dismay, honestly. But the fact is they have done so. In that, again, the fact that they have given the president a lot of these powers over the last few years is what the president is relying on here to say, hey, I have further power to restrict for national security interests, as well as to protect our own economy. And I think that's really what this is going to boil down to is what is the reason for the tariffs? If it's just to raise money, that has to be solely within the power of Congress. If it's to respond, right? I think reciprocal tariffs that we have against someone else, I think there's probably going to be some kind of limit on there. But what the Supreme Court doesn't want to do is it does not want to get into the policy of making laws, right? They opine on laws. Liberal justices, they make laws. They try to make laws. They try to make policy. Policy is not the point of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court does not say what is good or bad policy. They say what only is constitutional. So it'll be very interesting to see what comes of this, because I think there are a lot of great arguments that it in fact falls directly to Congress, or at least Congress has to approve. Now, all that being said, the Republicans have control of Congress, right? There's nothing preventing them from passing these tariffs, right? It would be one whole thing if the Democrats were in control, but the Republicans are in there. So pass the tariffs, or at least say, all right, Trump passed it, and then pass a law saying we adopt those tariffs that the president did. And that would protect it from all of this. The fact that we're even having to argue this is because Republicans in Congress are not doing their job. They're not backing up the president like they should. So that's what puts us in this particular interest to begin with. So I could easily see the Supreme Court saying this is the job of Congress, or at least the job of Congress to endorse it. And before to not violating Article 1 of the Constitution. And I wouldn't disagree with that analysis. So to me, this falls squarely on the shoulders of Republicans in Congress to be able to do something just like they did, not Republicans, but just like, well, I guess it was Republicans that did in 1974 when they just changed the law to after the decision to make Nixon's tariffs legal. That's what they did. That's what they should be doing here, because I think it's a dangerous precedent to set if we're giving a lot of executive power, because Donald Trump won't always be president. There will likely be a Democrat in the president in the future. That's the way it works. We're a cyclical system, and that can't happen. We got to take a break. I went too long. Keep it tuned here. All right, guys, that's all we have. We have to break here, but keep it. We'll see you next week. My name is Matthew Bishop, and you have heard the full story.
When the rain comes down on Babylon, the stonemason's phone rings all day long, and you gotta get back to the city.